Welcome back, everyone. Get ready because today we're diving deep into the brain, exploring how a neurotransmitter called GABA might be connected to autism. GABA, we hear about it a lot, but what's the deal with this brain chemical anyway?
Well, it's really interesting actually how much attention GABA has been getting, especially when you think about autism. Basically, GABA works like a brake pedal in the brain. All those neurons constantly firing off signals. GABA comes in and it helps to regulate all that activity, make sure things don't get too out of control.
So it's all about balance then, right? Kind of like a conductor in an orchestra, making sure all the instruments are playing together nicely.
Exactly. It maintains that delicate balance between excitation and inhibition in those neural circuits, which is like essential for your brain to function properly.
And that brings us to the research study we're looking at today. It's a 2009 paper called Decreased GABA Receptors and Benzodiazepine Binding Sites in the Anterior Cingulate Cortex in Autism. It was published in the journal Autism Research.
Yeah, that study really highlights the link between GABA and this specific part of the brain called the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC for short.
The ACC, remind me again, what does that do exactly?
Oh, the ACC is like a central hub. It controls a whole bunch of those higher order brain functions, like how we handle social situations, how we process emotions, even planning and making decisions.
So it's basically involved in almost everything we do, from how we interact with people to just figuring out our day.
Pretty much. And what this study found was that in autistic brains, there were significantly fewer GABA receptors in the ACC compared to non-autistic brains.
Hold on, so fewer GABA receptors. So does that mean like a weaker brake pedal in that part of the brain?
You got it. And if those signals aren't being regulated properly, that could really affect how the ACC functions. The researchers actually measured how many of these receptors were present in brain tissue, and the results were pretty significant.
It really makes you think how that difference in those receptors could actually translate into real-life experiences for people, right?
Absolutely. They found this decrease in both the upper and lower layers of the ACC too, which suggests that there's a pretty widespread impact on how different parts of this region are communicating with each other.
So it's not just like one tiny area affected, it's like the whole communication network in the ACC could be disrupted.
Yeah.
I also remember reading that GABA isn't always inhibitory. During brain development, it actually works more like an accelerator, doesn't it?
You're right. Early on in brain development, GABA is crucial for how those neurons migrate and how all those complex brain circuits get formed. It's actually excitatory in those early stages.
So if GABA is not signaling the way it should during those critical periods, could that lead to long-term changes in how the autistic brain develops, especially in the ACC?
That's a really important question, and it's something researchers are definitely trying to figure out. If there are disruptions in those early stages, it could absolutely have lasting effects on the brain's structure and how it functions.
This is all starting to connect, but it also raises so many more questions. I was reading about another brain area, the hippocampus, which is involved in learning and memory, and they found similar decreases in those GABA receptors there too in autistic individuals.
Right, the hippocampus is super important for learning and memory.
So is it possible that these abnormalities in the GABA system are affecting more than just the ACC? Could they be impacting multiple areas throughout the brain, disrupting different circuits and functions?
Yeah, it's definitely a possibility. It suggests that those GABAergic issues could be a common thread in the autistic brain, affecting lots of different areas and their connections.
It's so fascinating. We're basically piecing together a giant puzzle here, and GABA seems to be a key piece. One thing that always comes up when we talk about autism is seizures. Did the researchers in this study look into whether seizures might be influencing these changes in the GABA receptors?
They did. It's complicated, but they did observe a trend towards lower GABA binding in autistic individuals who had a history of taking medication for seizures, specifically anticonvulsants.
So there could be a link there between seizures and that decreased GABA receptor density.
Possibly, but the study couldn't say for sure if there's a direct link because they had a limited sample size. More research is definitely needed to fully understand what's going on there.
Seems like every answer we find just leads to even more questions.
Well, that's the exciting part of science. Each discovery opens up new avenues for research.
And speaking of new avenues, I was reading about how decreased GABA function has been linked to anxiety disorders, something that many autistic individuals experience, right?
Exactly. And that connection is especially important when we're talking about autism.
So could these GABA abnormalities in the ACC be a contributing factor to why many people with autism experience heightened anxiety?
That's definitely a compelling possibility. And if it turns out to be true, it could have a major impact on how we understand and address these challenges in the future. Makes you wonder, if these GABAergic issues are kind of at the core of some of the challenges autistic individuals face.
Yeah, like we're getting a whole new perspective on autism. So if messed up GABA signals are so important, could we, maybe develop therapies that specifically target GABA activity? Maybe that could help improve social and emotional well-being.
You're thinking like a scientist, and that's exactly what researchers are looking at. We already have medications that affect those GABA signals, like benzodiazepines, but
Didn't you mention, though, that those can sometimes backfire in autistic individuals? Like, instead of making them calmer, they can actually become more anxious.
you're right. That's a good point. Some autistic individuals do experience increased anxiety and agitation with benzodiazepines. It just shows how complicated the GABA system is, and why we need more targeted treatments.
Okay, so what would those targeted therapies look like? Are we talking about completely new drugs specifically designed to modulate GABA activity, like right in the ACC?
Yeah, that's one possibility, but there are some other really interesting avenues being explored too. Remember how we were talking about GABA's role in those early stages of brain development?
Right? How it acts like an excitatory neurotransmitter early on, helping to shape those brain circuits.
Exactly. So another approach could be to focus on interventions that support healthy GABA signaling during those critical periods, early on.
Wow. So maybe we could actually intervene early enough to help support healthy GABA function. What kind of interventions are we talking about here?
Well, there's more and more research coming out looking at the potential of things like nutritional interventions, specifically things that help the brain produce more GABA or maybe enhance its function.
So are you saying that what we eat could potentially influence GABA signaling and maybe even help with some of those challenges associated with autism?
I mean, there's definitely a lot of potential there, but we need to be careful about overstating things. We definitely need more research before we can start recommending specific diets or anything like that. We don't want to give people false hope.
Right, of course, we have to stick with what the science tells us. But it's still pretty amazing to think about the possibilities. All this research into GABA and the ACC could really open up new ways to understand and support individuals with autism.
Absolutely. And it's not just about treatments either. This research is helping us understand the basic neurobiology of autism, which is incredibly valuable knowledge in itself.
It's really incredible how much we've learned just from this one study. Really makes you appreciate the power of research and how it can impact people's lives.
Couldn't agree more. And it just shows how much we still have to learn about the brain. It's so complex.
Seriously, makes you wonder what other secrets the brain is hiding and what we'll discover in the future.
Those are definitely questions worth exploring. But for now, why don't we take a minute to go over what we've learned so far?
All right, let's backtrack a bit and see where this deep dive has taken us. We started off talking about GABA, the brain's brake pedal, and how crucial it is for keeping all those neurons in check.
Right, and then we focused in on that anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC. It's that central hub for social interaction, emotional processing, all those higher executive functions, the stuff that helps us navigate the world.
And going through that 2009 study, we found that key finding, remember, that significantly lower number of GABA receptors in the ACC of autistic brains compared to those without autism.
It's like maybe the volume's turned down a bit in the ACC, and that could explain why some autistic individuals have a harder time with social interaction and regulating their emotions.
And we also discussed how, GABA actually works as an accelerator during brain development, shaping how neurons move and connect with each other.
Yeah, it really emphasizes how important those early stages are and how any disruptions in GABA signaling during those times could lead to lasting changes in the brain's structure and how it functions.
And of course, we can't forget that link between decreased GABA function and anxiety, which is something that's so relevant to the experiences of many autistic individuals.
It's a complex puzzle for sure, and we're still putting the pieces together. But every new bit of information gets us closer to understanding the bigger picture.
It's amazing, though, how much we've learned just from examining this one study. Really makes you appreciate the power of research and how it can help us understand ourselves and each other better.
Absolutely. And it reminds us that we still have a lot to learn about the brain. Every discovery is like opening a door to a whole new world of possibilities.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, here's something to think about. If GABA signaling is so critical, what other brain regions and neural circuits might be playing a role? And how do those contribute to all the different experiences within autism?
Those are the questions that are going to drive future research. And the answers to those questions could lead to new and innovative ways to support autistic individuals. It's a journey of discovery, and we're really just getting started.
Well, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into GABA and autism. We hope you found it interesting, maybe even sparked your curiosity to learn more about this fascinating field.
And until next time, keep those brains buzzing.